I did one time work with a person. So we're shooting, and this person suddenly got annoyed at, people talking while we were shooting, which is bad. Julia Roberts revealed at 57, before stunning Hollywood by naming the 5 actors she absolutely hated sharing the screen with. The beloved Pretty Woman star, known for her radiant smile, didn't sugarcoat a thing. From on-set tantrums to massive egos and zero professionalism, Roberts finally exposed the stars who pushed her patience to the edge. You'll be shocked by who made her blacklist. George Clooney. In the glimmering haze of Hollywood, love stories often get rewritten before the credits roll. But for Julia Roberts, there was one chapter she never intended to share because it wasn't just a love story. It was a turning point, a moment that peeled away the illusion of stardom and left something raw underneath. It was 2001, the set of Ocean's 11. Julia had walked onto the Las Vegas shoot expecting a breezy, stylish heist flick. What she didn't expect was George Clooney, not the global heartthrob or the press-ready charmer, but the man behind the curtain, the one who brought her coffee in the early hours and made her laugh when her makeup smeared from exhaustion. Their connection wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. In fact, it thrived in the quiet. The late-night scripts passed between trailers, the inside jokes that no one else caught, and the soft offhand texts he would send when the crew had long gone home. One of them read simply, "Thinking about you." And Julia believed him. He believed him enough to imagine a different life outside of Hollywood. For the first time, she envisioned walking away, leaving behind red carpets and box office numbers to follow him to his beloved Lake Como, where the air was unbothered by flashing cameras. No scripts, no handlers, just a quieter life, maybe even a real one. But sometimes heartbreak doesn't arrive with a thunderclap. Sometimes it whispers like a blade through silk. In what became a defining moment, Julia read something she wasn't prepared for. An exclusive Vanity Fair interview in which Clooney, promoting the film, was asked about their on-screen chemistry. His words were cool, rehearsed, and devastating. "Julia is amazing. She acts well and kisses even better." That kiss, I think it alone will bring audiences back to the theater. The quote exploded in headlines, but the world didn't know what Julia did. That the kiss in question, the one audiences swooned over, was real. It wasn't scripted to feel like that. It wasn't just acting. For Julia, it was the moment she gave in. Fully. Honestly. She let her guard down in front of the camera and behind it. She gave her heart, and unknowingly, it became currency. What came next was not a tabloid rumor, not a paparazzi photo. It was something far colder, buried behind the scenes. George Clooney had shared a private photo, their photo, taken during a tender off-set night to a high-level producer. Not for money, not for gossip, but for leverage. He wanted to direct. Your Brothers was dangling a $2 million deal and the keys to a career-shifting opportunity. And to get it, he offered proof that he could deliver attention, starting with her. Julia never spoke publicly. She didn't rant. She didn't go on late-night TV or write a tell-all. Instead, she faxed him a single line. A farewell, really. Cool and fatal. "Thank you for making me famous by killing me." That was it. No angry voicemails, no private confrontation. She withdrew the way only someone truly hurt can. Quietly. Decisively. She dropped out of talks for the Ocean's 12 sequel, citing scheduling, though insiders whispered the real reason was heartbreak, not availability. Since then, their orbits have never crossed in public. No red carpet reunions, no sly nods in award speeches, no warm embraces at fundraisers. Nothing. It's as if that part of her life was sealed shut and placed in the vault of memory where only betrayal resides. To some it may seem overblown, just another Hollywood misunderstanding. But for Julia Roberts, who once believed she'd finally found a real connection in a town built on illusions, it was a breaking point. Not because he sold a kiss to the media, but because he sold her trust to the industry, all in pursuit of power. Years later, when asked in a rare interview whether she'd ever considered quitting Hollywood, Julia paused, smiled faintly, and said, "Only once, when I thought I'd found something more honest than the screen." What she didn't say, but everyone could see, was that she had meant him, Meryl Streep. In the golden haze of early 1990s Hollywood, Julia Roberts stood as a shimmering icon of charm, beauty, and box office power. But behind the dazzling smile was an actress yearning for more, a desire not just to entertain, but to transform, to be taken seriously, to create something lasting. And in 1991, she believed she had found that opportunity. The script arrived quietly, an unpolished, haunting manuscript based on the unpublished memoir of a European woman who survived war, only to find herself imprisoned by silence and emotional isolation within her aristocratic family. It was not glamorous, it was not easy, but it was powerful. The rawness, the darkness, it struck something deep in Julia. She wasn't just interested in acting in it. She wanted to shape it, to live it, to own it. She partnered with the original screenwriter, an independent voice from outside the studio system. For 7 months, Julia poured herself into the role. She worked through every chapter of the woman's psychological descent, every memory repressed, every breath withheld. She rehearsed monologues in private, explored trauma therapy techniques, even began producing the project herself, bringing in a small creative team that shared her vision. This would be her metamorphosis. Not a rom-com darling, but a serious, soul-exposing artist, Oscar-worthy, career-defining. Then came the silence. The film, initially called Ashes of the Rose, began seeking financing in late 1991. A few studio doors opened, but only cautiously. It wasn't an easy sell, not glamorous, not commercial, but as pitches circulated, a copy of the script, marked private development draft, somehow landed in the hands of Creative Artists Agency, CAA, the same agency representing Julia Roberts and Meryl Streep. A few months later, Julia's world was shattered. She learned through a Variety headline, not even a phone call, that a new film called The Last Silence was in development. The premise? A European woman returns from the trauma of war to face a cruelly repressive family. The cast? Meryl Streep in the lead. The producers? A new team? The writer? Different name. What's his name? Nowhere. The title was changed. The screenwriter Julia had worked with had been bought out quietly and signed to an airtight NDA. The project had been rebranded entirely and launched as Meryl's Personal Passion. All trace of Julia's fingerprints, her work, her commitment, her emotional investment, had been scrubbed clean. She didn't just steal a role, Julia would later say in a whisper to a close friend. She stole a piece of my life. Julia fell into a spiral. For the first time in her career, she withdrew from the spotlight completely. She pulled out of all upcoming film commitments. She stopped answering calls. Close friends described her as haunted. She developed insomnia, night sweats, panic attacks. The mere sound of Meryl's name on TV would cause her to leave the room, sometimes in tears. Privately, Julia blamed not just Meryl, but the industry that enabled it. The agents who played both sides, the producers who prioritized prestige over integrity, and the actress who accepted a role knowing it was born from another woman's pain. "I don't hate her because she's talented," Julia reportedly said years later. "I hate her because she knew I bled to build that, and she stepped over it without ever looking back." Julia never went public with the story. Hollywood was, and still is, a place where calling out a bigger name could end careers. But insiders knew. Her absence for the next year was no coincidence. Her refusal to work on dramatic material for a long stretch wasn't random, and when offers came later to co-star with Meryl in various high-profile ensemble pieces, her answer was always the same: only if it's in the contract. Every line, every scene, every boundary clearly defined. From that point on, Julia refused to be caught unprotected again. Her contracts became airtight. Every role was outlined with creative controls. She stopped improvising on sets, stopped trusting easily. And though she went on to deliver incredible performances, some even Oscar-worthy, there was a layer of steel beneath her eyes that hadn't been there before. The betrayal reshaped her, not just as an actress, but as a woman. And though she never said Meryl's name aloud in interviews again, those close to her knew the truth. The Last Silence wasn't just the title of a film. It was the wound she carried. Joy Behar. It was supposed to be a morning of vulnerability, not vitriol. Julia Roberts, beloved actress, America's sweetheart, and a woman known as much for her charm as for her raw honesty, had agreed to appear on The View. Live, no delay, no net. The intention behind her appearance was deeply personal. She wanted to speak about the challenges of raising children in the spotlight, the aching void left by the recent passing of her mother, and the quiet toll that decades of fame had taken on her spirit. Instead, what transpired just after 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time would become one of the most dissected moments in live television history. The atmosphere on the set was typical of The View, a blend of friendly chatter and underlying tension. Julia, seated comfortably, had begun to open up about her mother's wisdom and strength, her voice trembling ever so slightly. The audience was leaning in. And then Joy Behar struck. "Do you think your success comes more from your legs and your mouth than from your talent?" Joy asked, half laughing as though delivering a punchline. But there was no laughter from Julia, no cue cards, no witty retort, just the silence of a room that had stopped breathing. Joy, often applauded for her boldness and sharp-tongued humor, had crossed a line. Even the other panelists froze, too stunned to diffuse what was clearly no longer entertainment, but a personal assault masked as comedy. It wasn't just the words. It was the calculated way Joy said them, with a smirk and a tone that suggested this was less of a question and more of an accusation. Julia stared at her, not blinking, not smiling. The camera caught the exact moment her expression changed, from polite patience to something colder, something wounded. Then she whispered, almost inaudibly but unmistakably, "You're turning me into a joke, a smiling piece of meat." The studio fell into an eerie hush. With a calm that was more unnerving than any outburst could have been, Julia unclipped her mic. She stood up slowly, gave one brief glance to the audience, and exited the stage. No dramatic storm off, no tears, just silent rejection of the premise she'd been lured into. There was no commercial break, only the raw, awkward scramble of hosts trying to pivot. But no pivot was possible. The clip went viral within minutes, and by nightfall, the country was in a digital uproar. Social media exploded into two camps. Some viewers hailed Joy Behar as fearless and unapologetic, chalking it up to her signature sarcasm. Others were outraged, accusing her of weaponizing gender against a fellow woman, of perpetuating the very misogyny she so often condemned. She invited Julia on to share her soul and instead gutted her on air, wrote one Twitter user. Joy Behar did to Julia what men in Hollywood have done for decades, reduce her to parts, posted another. And yet, the hashtag #ChowGetOverIt. Julia trended briefly, a bitter echo of how often society tells women to laugh off their dehumanization. For nearly a year, Julia said nothing. No interviews, no cryptic posts, no subtle nods. Until she reappeared, unexpectedly and on her own terms. A simple video, unfiltered and raw, posted on a quiet Sunday afternoon. She sat alone, wearing a gray sweater, hair pulled back, and she didn't smile. I've spent my entire life being told to smile. Smile on red carpets. Smile when they interrupt my dinner. Smile when they ask invasive questions about my body, my kids, my worth, she said. Her voice was steady. I agreed to speak as a woman, a mother, a daughter, not a punchline. I can't forgive someone who made me feel like a slab of meat on Hollywood's butcher table. To me, Joy isn't a talk show host. She's a killer in a dress. The metaphor hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't about one insult. It was about years of being objectified, scrutinized, and dissected under the guise of fame and femininity. Julia had become, in that moment, not just a woman defending herself, but a symbol of every woman who's ever been belittled under the guise of a joke. In the days that followed, Joy offered a half apology, more explanation than remorse. I was trying to be funny. I thought we were riffing, she said during a subsequent episode of The View. But the damage had been done. Julia's walk-off became iconic, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet. It was a refusal, not a rebuttal, a protest without words, and for many it became a rallying point. Not just about Julia Roberts or Joy Behar, but about every moment a woman had to swallow an insult and smile for the camera. This time, Julia didn't smile. She walked, and in doing so, she drew a line, one that audiences, and perhaps Joy herself, won't soon forget. Bradley Cooper. He was once America's boyfriend, the affable blue-eyed charmer whose every smile seemed to promise sincerity. But to Julia Roberts, Bradley Cooper would come to represent something far darker, a calculated betrayal dressed in charisma. It wasn't just the bedroom, Julia later confided to a close friend years after the ordeal. He didn't just seduce me into bed, he seduced me into headlines, into scenes, and onto the pedestal of humiliation. It began in 2010, when Julia was taking a bold step forward in her career, not just as an actress, but as a producer. The Art of Falling was a passion project, a dark, intimate romantic drama exploring vulnerability, mental health, and the weight of emotional dependency. She was deeply involved in every stage of its creation, from rewrites to casting. She wanted the film to be real, honest, painfully raw. Enter Bradley Cooper. Fresh off his breakout success in The Hangover, he was the talk of Hollywood, sharp-witted, photogenic, and hungry for more serious roles. When he showed up to read for the lead during early casting sessions, Julia said she felt something shift in the room. It wasn't even a real audition, one producer later said. He was charming, magnetic, but it was the way he looked at her, like they shared a secret no one else was in on. What started as professional chemistry turned quickly into something more. Flirty texts, late-night rehearsals that blurred into personal conversations. Julia was smitten, not blindly, but hopefully. And when she cast Bradley in the lead over 3 more seasoned contenders, people in her circle raised eyebrows. "Are you sure about this?" her longtime agent had asked. "He's green and ambitious. That combination's tricky." But Julia was sure, or she thought she was. She trusted her gut. That would prove to be the greatest misjudgment of her career. From the moment filming began, subtle red flags started waving. Bradley, now in the spotlight, began feeding the tabloids. At first, it was harmless. Whispers of on-set sparks, blurry photos of Julia and Bradley laughing between takes. But then came the more invasive leaks. Private shots clearly taken from within closed sets. Headlines speculating on a torrid affair. "Those photos were never supposed to exist," said the film's cinematographer. "Only someone with access could have taken them." Julia confronted Bradley. His response was glib. "Publicity is half the game, Jules." But it didn't stop there. Midway through filming, He began pressuring the director to tweak the script. His character, originally written with tragic complexity, was softened, made more likable, more heroic. Julia fought back, but subtle changes made it in. She writes, "Extra close-ups," a new final line that shifted the film's emotional climax to his arc. And then came the breaking point. One evening, during a quiet moment in her trailer, Julia discovered that Bradley had secretly recorded one of their late-night offset conversations. She was sharing a deeply personal story about vulnerability, shame, loss, and he had been recording her without permission. For character research, he claimed. Don't you want the film to be great? That was it. Julia's reaction was swift and final. She cut him from all future promotional interviews. His name disappeared from discussions about the potential sequel. By the time the film wrapped, the energy on set was icy. Julia fulfilled her producer duties professionally, but the damage had been done. She never spoke his name on television again. Years later, when asked about mistakes she regretted in Hollywood, Julia didn't hesitate. "Some men broke my heart," she said, "but Bradley Cooper made me disgusted with my own judgment. I didn't lose a man. I lost a piece of myself to someone who wore integrity like a costume." The Art of Falling was released in late 2011 to modest box office success and strong critical praise, particularly for Julia's haunting performance. But industry insiders knew the film came with invisible scars. No sequel was ever made. And to this day, when Bradley Cooper's name comes up in interviews, Julia simply smiles, pauses, and changes the subject. Sean Penn. In the winter of 2005, Julia Roberts took a sharp turn from her usual mainstream projects and agreed to star in a low-budget psychological drama directed by Sean Penn, a man whose brilliance was often matched by his volatility. At the time, Penn was riding high on a wave of critical acclaim, known for pushing the boundaries of realism and emotional rawness in his films. The project promised something different, a raw, cerebral exploration of grief, madness, and memory. Julia was intrigued. She was ready to shed the America's Sweetheart image, not through shock value, but through serious, nuanced acting. She made one thing clear when she signed on: no nudity, no simulated sex, no betrayal of her personal boundaries. The contract reflected her wishes. The original script was compelling, complex, and, most importantly, respectful. It featured a woman unraveling emotionally, not undressing physically. Julia trusted the process. She trusted Penn's vision. Most of all, she trusted that a respected director wouldn't exploit her vulnerability, especially one she was brave enough to show on screen in non-physical ways. What happened next would leave a scar she never quite managed to speak about in public, but one that shaped her view of the film industry forever. Filming wrapped after a tense 42-day shoot. There were long nights, cold sets, and emotionally draining takes. But Julia endured it all with the quiet professionalism that had defined her career. She had no idea what was brewing behind the scenes. Once the film entered post-production, rumors began circulating in tight Hollywood circles about a powerful raw scene featuring Julia. Unlike anything she'd ever done, she brushed it off as speculation until she received a late-night call from her longtime agent. A leaked international cut of the film had surfaced in Europe, and it included a scene of her, fully nude, back turned to the camera, clearly changing clothes between setups. The footage had been captured without her knowledge from a concealed angle. There was no performance in it, no context, just exposure, unfiltered, unconsented. She was livid, humiliated, devastated. Julia immediately confronted Sean Penn. She demanded the scene be cut from all versions of the film, citing breach of contract, invasion of privacy, and basic human decency. But Sean's response stunned her into silence. Audiences crave truth. he reportedly said with a casual shrug. And your body is an irresistible truth. It was not just dismissive, it was cruel. It turned her body, her autonomy, into a tool for cinematic honesty, a word too often used to justify exploitation. Julia broke down in tears that night, recounting the incident to a close friend over the phone. For someone who had always guarded her privacy fiercely, even at the height of her fame, it was the ultimate betrayal. Her tears changed nothing. The U.S. version of the film was quietly edited to blur or cut the scene. But in multiple international territories, the original footage remained intact. No warning, no explanation, no apology. She never sued, she never spoke out publicly. Insiders say she feared being branded difficult or overly sensitive, labels that had ruined other actresses' careers for far less. So she swallowed the shame and moved on, or at least pretended to. In press interviews for the film's release, she put on a brave face. She praised the script. She avoided mention of the director altogether. Years passed. The film quietly faded from memory, a footnote in Julia's otherwise stellar career. But the trauma didn't. In a 2022 private conversation during a weekend retreat with longtime friends and collaborators, Julia finally let something slip. It wasn't a press quote, it wasn't a soundbite for the public. It was just a raw confession, buried in a moment of reflection over wine and candlelight. "If anyone asks who I hate most in life," she said, her voice cracking, "I won't hesitate to name the first man who put my body on screen without my consent." Those words never made headlines. But to those in the room, the pain was unmistakable. It wasn't just about nudity, it was about power, betrayal, and the way women, even Oscar-winning women, could be stripped of agency with a single camera angle. She never worked with Sean Penn again. And though she continued to take bold roles in the years that followed, Julia Roberts' trust in Hollywood never fully recovered. What do you think about the 5 actors that Julia Roberts hates the most? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.